Patrick Jane once memorized the names of 2,000 people he shook hands with, yet you can't remember what you had for breakfast last week. So I did a ton of research, watched every single episode, and figured out how Jane's memory works. And today, I'm going to explain to you how you can do the same. In Throwing Fire, the team is working the murder of a baseball scout named Barney Sloop, and Jane takes a fly ball to the head early on, which drops him into flashbacks of his teenage years working the carnival with his father, Alex. Alex called what Patrick did X-ray eyes, and he would push the kid out into the crowd to read total strangers before they ever sat down at the table. But what actually was happening is that Jane was being forced to notice things fast and then hold them in his head long enough to use them a few minutes later, over and over, every night for years, which is not a gift at all. When researchers at University College London scanned World Memory Championship competitors, they found no exceptional intelligence and no structural brain differences, just a trained spatial strategy. So the thing to steal from his childhood is the reps, and you can start today with something simple. You can pick a place you go to often, like a coffee shop, and right before you leave, look away and name 5 specific things you saw. Instead of saying, "Oh, I saw a guy in a jacket," go for the color of the jacket and what he was holding. Do that once a day for 2 weeks and you'll start catching details without trying, which is the base layer for everything else in this video. In the pilot, the team catches a case that looks like Red John's work. The victim was left to bleed out, there's a smiley face painted on the wall in her blood, and everybody in that room has already made up their mind. Jane walks in, looks around once, and calls it a fake, because the face is on the wrong wall. And Red John always paints it where it's the first thing you see coming through the door. He catches that in a second because he's holding a template built from every Red John scene he has ever studied, so anything out of place jumps at him like a typo in a sentence you've read 100 times. Chase and Simon found the same thing in chess players in 1973, where masters rebuilt board positions far better than beginners because they saw a few meaningful patterns where a beginner sees 20 loose pieces. You can build templates like that on purpose in anything you care about. All you have to do is to learn what normal looks like first, and then the odd ones file themselves, whether that's faces at work, the shape of a standard contract, or something else. You already do this to an extent without even realizing it. Exceptions are simple to store once you have a baseline for them, which is why experts remember more while visibly doing less. In Flame Red, the team drives out to a small town called Marquesa, where a man named Rich Garcia has been burned inside his own car, and the arson work is far too clean to pass as an accident. When Jane pokes around the back of a trailer belonging to Tommy Olds, the local handyman everybody treats as mentally challenged, he spots a copy of Moby Dick sitting next to a pile of children's books and toys. Later, he baits Tommy into correcting him on the name of Captain Ahab's ship, and the entire act falls apart on camera. What made that book stick in Jane's head was the question it raised, because a heavy novel in that trailer made no sense, and your brain keeps the things it has to think about. Craik and Tulving ran 10 experiments in 1975 showing that words processed for meaning are recalled far better than words you simply look at or repeat back. So when you find something you want to hold on to, ask one question about it instead of repeating it to yourself. Why is this here? Who would want this? What does this remind me of? If someone tells you they work in logistics, ask yourself what that person is moving around all day and picture it. The question forces your brain to do a little work on the information, and that work is the thing that turns it into a memory. 2 seconds of thinking beats 20 seconds of repeating every single time. Which takes us to the one episode where Jane sits down and teaches the whole method out loud. In one of the episodes, an army nurse named Lucy Green is found dead near a military base, and the anonymous caller who reported it turns out to be Pete Cohen, a soldier whose PTSD has damaged his short-term memory so badly that any distraction wipes out whatever he was doing. At the end of the case, Pete comes to the office and asks for help, and Jane starts teaching him to build a memory palace. The idea underneath it is simple. Your brain struggles with abstract lists and is unbelievably good with places, because you could walk through your childhood home in your head right now without any effort, so you smuggle the list into a place. That's the method of Loci, and here's how you actually build one. Pick a route you know insanely well, like your home, classroom, or your walk to work, and fix 10 stops along it in a set order, like front door, shoe rack, kitchen sink, and so on. Then take whatever you need to remember and park an absurd image at each stop, because bland images fade and ridiculous ones stay in your brain. Like if you have to remember a book, say a blue cat holding that book while laying in the kitchen sink. To remember it later, just walk the route. You reuse the same route forever, and after a few runs, it becomes automatic. Start with a shopping list rather than something important, because the first palace is about proving the route works. And after that, you can put literally anything in there. Once you have a palace, though, you still need a way to unlock what's sitting inside it. A bomb goes off in the CBI parking lot with Jane standing right next to it, and he wakes up blind, with the doctor telling him his sight should come back in 2 or 3 days, but he checks himself out anyway. Sitting with the widow, he asks her to hand him her husband's belongings one at a time and works through them purely by touch, where he touches a watch with a bull engraved on the back. His fingers keep tracing that engraving, and it drops him straight into a memory of a psychic reading he did 8 years earlier holding an identical watch. He was handling objects until one of them opened a door, which is a completely different move from sitting there straining to remember. Tulving and Thompson named this encoding specificity in 1973, meaning whatever surrounded you when you stored a memory becomes the key that reopens it later. So attach a cue on purpose at the moment you're learning something. Drink the same tea while you study. Sit in the same chair, play one album on repeat, then bring that cue back when you need the material again. Godin and Baddeley showed how strong this is by having divers learn word lists underwater and then struggle to recall them on land. If you can't control where you'll be when you need it, study the same material in 3 or 4 places so the memory gets several keys. It's the same thing Jane uses to get someone's memory back, like in the next episode. When Teresa's fingerprint turns up on the magazine of the gun that killed a guy she personally put away, she can't remember what she did that Tuesday night, and she fails the polygraph. Jane hypnotizes her at her own request and walks her back to Tuesday evening, finishing paperwork on a different case, and she still hits a wall. Later, Dr. Carmen tries the same move at her house, piece by piece, the dumpsters, the cross nearby. That walkthrough is the real technique, and investigators use a version of it called Mental Reinstatement of Context, which a 2010 review of 65 experiments found produces a large increase in correct details recalled. The logic is that your brain files a memory together with everything that was around it, so you get to the memory by rebuilding the surroundings first. Next time you lose your keys or a blank on a name, drop the thing itself and rebuild the moment instead. Where were you standing? What were you holding? What had you just been talking about? What was playing in the background? The thing you want usually falls out on its own within about 30 seconds. The warning from this episode is that a confident person feeding you details can plant something that never happened, so let yourself fill the gaps rather than letting somebody else do it. It's a really powerful technique. In Black Cherry, Jane is working on his list of everyone he has shaken hands with, and it closes with him alone in his room at the office, going through the very same names again. That simple thing is the whole method. He keeps dragging those names back out of his own head instead of just rereading the page, and dragging something out is what makes it stay in. Roediger and Karpika tested this in 2006, where students who reread material beat students who tested themselves after 5 minutes, then lost badly to them after a week. So flip how you review anything. Close the book, write down everything you can remember, then open it and check what you missed. It feels worse than rereading, and that feeling of difficulty is the exact part that's doing the work. Rereading is comfortable because you recognize the words, and recognizing something gives you a false signal that you could produce it from scratch. In practice, for something you need next month, review it in about a week and keep testing yourself instead of just remembering. 3 spaced sessions beat 10 crammed ones and take less of your time overall. Here, Jane and Teresa fly to Beirut to get close to a smuggler named John, who moves messages through couriers who memorize them because paper gets found and phones get traced. John's men test Jane by forcing him to his knees in front of a bathtub, reading him 6 words, putting him under, 6 more, under again, then 5 more and a longer hold. He asks for a towel, dries himself off, and gives all of them back in order. The real job turns out to be 81 unrelated numbers he has to carry across the Atlantic. So how the hell does he memorize random numbers? The whole thing runs on conversion rather than raw capacity, because Jane turns every item into a picture and hangs those pictures along a route he already knows. Erickson and his colleagues published a case in Science in 1980 where one ordinary student trained his digit span from 7 up to 79 by recoding digit strings as running times. Since he was a runner and those numbers already meant something to him. Do the same with the numbers in your life. Give 0 through 9 a fixed image each. Read long numbers in pairs and chain the images into one short scene. Card details, dates, and phone numbers stop being random and start being a story you can walk through. Now here's the one that defines him. Jane held the names of 2,164 people he had shaken hands with since the night his family was murdered, all of it stored in the memory palace, and he ground that list down to 408, then to a final 7, and it finishes with Thomas McAllister. Names are the hardest thing you can ask a brain to hold, and McWeeny and his colleagues showed why in 1987, when people learning new faces remembered a man's job and forgot his surname even when it was the identical word. A job connects to 100 things you already know, while a bare name connects next to nothing at all. So give the name something to grab onto. Repeat it out loud once when you hear it, turn it into a picture, like a baker covered in flour, and hook that picture to something on their face you'll see again. Two more things were quietly working for Jane underneath all of it. Emotion tags a memory as important, which is why grief made his list stick. The uncomfortable takeaway is that almost nothing Jane does with his memory is talent or a gift or psychic at all, and the research keeps coming back to the same things, like tying things to a cue or a picture, a memory palace, and repeating things more times than you can imagine. So that's gonna be it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. I'll catch you guys in the next one.